following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Good morning, everybody. We are back after our 1 week hiatus. We hope everybody had a great Father's Day last week, but it's time to get back into some fantasy football talk. We've got special guest John Kirkner with us today, Kevin Wilson, myself, Chase Thornton. We're going to talk some best ball. We're going to debate a little bit about some ADPs, some of our favorite stacks, and we'll touch on some of the NFL headlines from this week. All that and more coming up right now on Belly Up Fantasy Live.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. All right, winding the clock. There's the bell. So here we go. Welcome back in, everybody. I am Chase Thornton coming to you from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar, and this is Belly Up Fantasy Live. Took off last weekend. Like we said, we hope everybody had a great Father's Day. Certainly, while we took off, the NFL did not. So, there are plenty of things to talk about today for news items. And then, like I said, we want to get into a little bit of ADP talk for the best ball world and talk about some stacks and if they're realistic at their current ADPs, if you want them like that. But first off, I'm not alone today. As per usual, we have our good friend Kevin Wilson looking like he's at work today. How you doing, Kevin? Looking sharp.
I'm doing good, and I'm not in any basement bars today. I'm in fact at work, so I might have to get interrupted at some point. But I'm glad to be here, and I did have a great weekend last weekend. I hope you did as well, and I'm excited to get started.
Excellent. All right. Well, if you got to go, you got to go. Duty calls. That's fine. But as I said, we have another guest with us today. He's a writer for Belly Up Fantasy Sports. He's also the host of the Eye Test podcast, and he's a friend of the show, been on with us before. But please welcome in here, John Kirkner. John, How we doing?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me back on. I think last time we were talking, I was like one article in for Belly Up, and we're loving it still.
Right? Yeah. I know that you just had a couple of articles come out on quarterback tiers, and so like you said, this is kind of exactly what you're looking at right now. Our article today, your article that came out a couple of days ago on quarterback tiers and where you think that they fit in. Is because rankings work perfect with ADP. I mean, ADP and rankings, they're intrinsically linked, right? They go together. And so
sometimes,
yeah. I mean, in theory, if in theory they go together, or at least they're linked, you can't really get away from one without talking about the other one here. But first, real quick, like I said, the news did not stop this week in the NFL. And there weren't any giant earth-shattering things that happened, but there's a couple things, especially from the fantasy standpoint, that we're going to want to talk about and that we're going to want to consider here as we go forward, as we get into draft season here, and as we are looking at this upcoming season. And the first one, Tyreek Hill, we mentioned it last week, Kevin, you and I did or 2 weeks ago, that Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill's under investigation here for punching a guy at a marina or something. I don't know. The details are murky at this point, as they usually are. But after it looked like he was in the clear, all of a sudden it says now that Tyreek Hill is still under investigation for this matter, and that it may not be just all behind him. As we know from past incidents with other players as well, that you don't necessarily need to have legal jeopardy anymore, though, to be public or punished by the league. So if the league determines that, hey, maybe they're not pressing charges, but you brought a stain on the league by being in this headline at all, we've seen Roger Goodell hand punishment down before for that. So we have Tyreek Hill still under investigation, but then to go along with the theme that I just brought up, we get the news this week. In fact, just yesterday, I believe it was, that Devontae Adams is not under investigation anymore for the incident where he shoved the photographer leaving the football field last year. Those charges have been dropped. But as we said, that doesn't mean that the jeopardy of some kind of league punishment is out of the question. So I guess the topic here then is twofold. I mean, we've got Tyreek Hill still under investigation. Are you worried there from whatever you've seen? We've got Davante Adams not anymore. Where do we think that puts him? And do we think that the league comes down on either or both of them? And does that affect how you see them in drafts here? Kevin, let's start with you real quick.
Well, the issue that I see that Davante Adams has is it was on camera. And we all know that if it happens on camera, it's 10 times as bad.
Right.
So the fact that the charges were dropped, as you mentioned, only took them, what 6 years to get to this point?
Right.
But
that was early. It was that first half?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. And until I saw that story yesterday, I had even forgotten that it even happened.
Me too.
Right.
So if the NFL hasn't, it's kind of hard to say because, like I said, it was on camera, so you expect there'd be some kind of something happen with that. But until yesterday, NFL hadn't said anything about it either. So I don't see any kind of suspension going on there or anything, but maybe some fines or something like that. And as far as Hill's, this is about as murky a deal as I think I've ever seen. So it's really hard to come up with an answer one way or the other on him. So at this point, I'm not really worried about either one of them. And like I said before, this is a good situation where we don't draft until August. So, right. So at this point, I'm not worried about either one of them, but it's certainly worth monitoring.
Yeah, that's been a mantra of our show is the draft as late as you can, but we do know we are in best ball draft season. Unfortunately, you kind of have to take some of those shots. But John, what's your take on the legal troubles of the NFL's wide receiver diva core?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried either. I would say that when you're dealing with these like personal conduct policies with the NFL, one thing that we know for sure is that it takes a long time. We're seeing it all last offseason. We were all worried about the Alvin Kamara suspension and nothing happened. We're probably going to see it. Right. Yeah, now we're worried about it. So I think next year is going to bring up the question of like the Tyreek Hill suspension like you said, the details are murky. We're not getting all like specifics. I think that it's not going to affect Tyreek Hill's production this year, but I would be worried, if I was a dynasty owner of Tyreek Hill, I would be a little bit worried. And I mean, also with the fact that Tyreek Hill is saying that he's going to be done playing football in 2 years.
Yep.
So 3 years. So,
he is putting
it's a big worry. Time to sell Tyreek Hill and see what you get.
Yeah. If you're an owner of his, you want to definitely have him keep his mouth shut about that.
Yeah. But for best ball, I'm totally taking Tyreek Hill. I think he's going to play all the games this year.
All right.
Oh, absolutely. Unless Miami does something dumb, and we're going to talk about that later, I'm sure, with a certain wide receiver that's floating around out there, and that's been floating around for Chase, that we've talked about him for the last 4 weeks straight now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a pipe dream, and like I said, we'll talk about that later. But right now, Tyreek Hill, definitely he's a go as far as any kind of draft to me.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the idea that Tyreek Hill's situation until it gets resolved one way or another, or we get more. I don't think the league will come out with anything. Like you said, the whole Kamara thing has been ongoing. It was a question going into last season,
right?
And it's still not resolved. And the league has tended to show a preference to wait until there's at least some kind of answer there. But as Kevin brought up with the Davante Adams situation, that's on camera for all of us to see. That was a bad look for the league. It was a bad look immediately. It was the only headline after that game, right after that game. Nothing else was being talked about. The game itself, honestly, I know he was frustrated because they lost, but otherwise I can't tell you much about that game. But I know he pushed that camera guy down as he was leaving the field, and I know that it immediately was a stain on the league. I would not be shocked to see something come down for Adams, and I think it's more than a fine because of how blatant and how public it was. I don't think it's, I mean, we never know with the NFL. I mean, you know, guy could get in trouble for, unfortunately, domestic violence and get, you know, a slap on the wrist. And then another guy, it seems like, gets caught speeding on the freeway between Virginia and Carolina and gets half a season. It seems like you never know with the NFL's. There's no set policy where it says,
and there's no set policy when they're going to announce the policy either.
Right. Yeah. Ever. So it makes me pause a little bit on Davante Adams, but still, he's Davante Adams. You're talking 2 of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL here, and 2 of the top 5 wide receivers in a lot of drafts. So I'm not really, I'm not going to stop drafting Davante Adams, you know, as a top 10 wide receiver based on this. But I do think there's a chance he misses some time. So I think you want to make sure that if you do have him, you've got, you know, you've got a strong reserve core of your wide receivers. It might make you take another wide receiver or 2 that you weren't expecting to shore that up. But I think the Hill thing.
Yeah, when it comes to the schedule, you know, because the Raiders, they start in Denver and then they play Buffalo. So if he misses both of those games, you know, that's strong defenses. Maybe you're not missing out on a whole lot.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's best ball. There's no guarantee that a guy is up top, but you're certainly giving yourself a better shot with
absolutely you are
a guy like Davante Adams.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Kevin brought it up here a little bit ago, so we can move right into talking about some Dolphins here. On weirdly enough, Dalvin Cook and the Dolphins have supposedly been talking actually about a deal. We knew that there were some talks going on, and that's been the favorite. That's been the betting favorite for him to land all season, all off season since he got released.
And as we said, we don't like it.
Right.
How come?
Well, we'll pair this with the talk about DeAndre Hopkins is, free agency, and the report that supposedly the 2 of them have discussed or, have kind of at least tossed around the idea of going somewhere together. Maybe they'll both take their talents to South Beach. Who the hell knows?
That would be crazy.
It would be crazy. I don't know that I like it for fantasy purposes. I think all it does is muddy the waters.
None whatsoever.
Yeah, but this is something that Kevin's been pretty vocal about. So Kevin, why don't you tell us why you hate all of this and why do you hate the Dolphins so much?
Well, I don't hate the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are in a good spot already. And as we talked about, you and I, Chase, they've got running backs already. So
they got about 18 of them.
They got they're going to need a whole truckload to get all the running backs to training camp. And as I said, as soon as we did our review of the draft, and I liked Ashane down there, and if Calvin, if he goes down there, you can cancel Christmas on every running back they have, except for the rookie, and you're delaying him to doing anything.
Right.
So I think that if they didn't have all that he could go down there and fit in, no question about that. But DeAndre Hopkins has no business whatever going to Miami. They've already got 2 wide receivers that are going to be going, Hill, as we talked about, is a first-round draft pick. And Waddles is not far behind him. So what in the world do you need DeAndre Hopkins for? You have to have some other team needs that you can address other than that. And if you're going to bring the 2 of them together, where are you getting the money for that? So no matter what team we're talking about, them playing together is the biggest pipe dream I think I've ever heard in my life. It's not going to happen. So can we stop this whole nonsense? They're not going to play together, and they're not going to do it on Miami.
All right. Well, you mentioned the idea that they've got Tyreek Hill. He's a locked in first round pick, especially the best ball format. Jalen Waddle is he's going late second round right now. It's perfectly conceivable you can grab the 2 of them, and then Tua goes a little bit later in drafts. But I mean, putting a stack together of those 3 is perfectly doable ADP wise. It's fun and awesome. But if they put you mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. They've even got a slot guy in Braxton Berrios right now that should see quite a few targets from them. honestly, I mean, they don't have a tight end anymore, but they didn't have a tight end last year either. Mike Gesicki, they never
Right.
used him as a tight end, and they never threw him in the first
Right.
place.
Right. He had like 6 catches last year or something like that.
Bringing in a guy like Braxton Berrios, who is an experienced and a talented and a good slot wide receiver there, you've already got a top 3 that can play with anybody in the league. You know, their top 2 arguably is the best top 2 in the league, but their top 3 can play with anybody's top 3 if Tua can stay healthy, and that's another entire show's worth of debate. But yeah, taking Hopkins down there. First off, Hopkins is not going to take a discount for anybody. He's not going to.
Right. Because if he was, he would already sign with somebody that was going to win a championship. Because remember, Chase, with his 3 criteria, which lasted about a week, and then it went straight down the drain because he wants his $30 million or 15 or whatever the number that is. You don't give it to him, he's not signing. And that's very clear.
Baltimore really kind of bent the rest of the league over when they signed Odell Beckham to what they signed him to. But Dalvin Cook, on the other hand, now is a very real possibility to end up down there between the scheme fit. He's actually talked about the scheme fit, and all the other ties that have him down there. But like we said, they've already got like a fourth of their roster is running backs that can start anywhere else, or a lot of other places in the league. It's a terrible market right now for running backs. But getting the 2 of them down there, that just muddies the waters. But again, what's your thoughts on this here, John? What did you got?
Well, I mean,
you want to say here?
I see the reason that like the Dolphins could use Dalvin Cook, but he wants big money, it seems like, and they don't really invest that much into their running backs. I mean, you got Mostert, Wilson. I think they're making like less than $5 million. I think they put the most of their money last year on Chase Edmonds, and he wasn't even used. He was like the highest paid running back on the team last year. And I fell for that. I fell for that in best ball last year. I'll tell you that.
I fell for it as well, John. So don't feel bad.
So, I mean, Dalvin Cook to the Dolphins, that would be great, but I'm worried if that would still be a committee type of offense for the running backs, and that is not Dalvin Cook's MO. I mean, he can still be a bell cow, which is why I think that I'm more leaning towards him possibly going on to the Broncos and taking over that role if Javonte Williams isn't going to be ready, although it seems like Sean Payton is making it seem like he is going to be ready. I'm not sure if that's completely true. But I'm also
is that smoke screen or is that reality here? Is that Sean Payton being a veteran NFL coach, or
just think it's too early to be saying like Javonte Williams is ready to go and he's not going to be on the PUP.
He shredded every knee ligament in that part of the state. Like
we all think he's not going to be able to play by week 1.
Other people's knees blew out on that hit. He just doesn't have like that's just not something you bounce back from. I don't care what age, even if you're Adrian Peterson.
So I think the Broncos are a pretty high favorite for me. I mean, they're second in landing odds. So
yes,
I'm gonna roll with the Broncos here just because I think he could probably fit in a little bit better than in Miami.
I agree with that. I like the idea of him in Denver better because I think the sooner that could happen, the better, because it would answer our questions about Javonte Williams.
Yeah,
and it definitely tells you can afford to wait on Javonte Williams. You don't have to try to take him early thinking you're going to get a full season out of him.
Don't take Javonte Williams early. Please don't do that.
I argued that last year and I turned out right, not for the correct reasons, but I turned out right on that. So one of the other things I want to talk about too, then real quick here from NFL headlines before we get to our first ad here, the Bills extended Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane through 2027. And I am of the idea, especially, I mean, obviously this is a team that's had some success. They haven't made it as far as they want to yet, but they are in the conversation and have been for seemingly the entire tenure of these two gentlemen here. And I'm of the belief that stability at the top of the organization is always a positive thing. I like to point to teams like, I mean, obviously Bill Belichick is Bill Belichick and that crazy legend that will be written. But look at Pittsburgh. Look at how few head coaches they've had literally in their entire careers. They've had 3 head coaches in my lifetime. and they're always relevant. They're always relevant. Even on a down year, they're relevant, and their down years are other teams like, yeah, hey, that's a pretty successful season. I love stability at the top of an organization. So extending these two guys through 27, you know that you're going to have them and keep the brain trust of the franchise intact through Josh Allen's prime here. As we're going through Josh Allen's prime. I mean, when you've got that's the big three, you've got the coach, you've got the GM, and you've got the quarterback set down. I mean, Buffalo they don't have to worry. Any other team, when you're looking for at least one out of those three spots, you're in trouble. But I mean, when you saw that news, how did you feel about that, John Kirkner here?
So I agree that stability is very important in the front office, but what I'm not the biggest fan of is like Sean McDermott is a defensive-minded head coach. And I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, we saw their draft this year too. I mean, Stephon Diggs needs some help, or I guess Josh Allen needs more options. But Stephon Diggs is certainly the whiner of this group, and I think he's just upset. Yeah, I think he's just upset with how they're not stacking the offense to be successful and get to that upper tier. Like they're making the playoffs every year, but they're not winning Super Bowls. They're always Super Bowl favorites, but they just can't seem to get the job done. And I think that Sean McDermott's defensive mind comes into play there, where they're just not helping out the offense as much. So I like the stability, but I'm not a big fan of having an extended defensive-minded coach. As good of a coach he is, I just think that they could be winning more games if they focus on the offense, because right now we are in an offensive league. You got to score a lot of points to win Super Bowls. We've seen it in the past couple years, minus that Rams-Patriots one. But, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Kevin, what's your thoughts on what's happening in the upper echelons of the Buffalo franchise there?
Well, when it comes to having a defensive coach, I don't really have, there's no issues with that, as long as you have a strong offensive coordinator. And so that's one of the things maybe they need to take a look at. And that's also one of the reasons why I was saying I like Dalvin Cook to go up to Buffalo. That's my number one landing spot if him and his brother get along, which is unknown.
If they get along better than Aaron and Jordan Rodgers did, yeah.
That's right. So stability is great, but we all know just because you have a contract doesn't mean you can't be on the street in about a week.
Right.
So
especially at the coaching position.
Especially at the coaches' positions, is Arizona. How many coaches are they paying? So. But I like the stability, and it tells everybody this is what we're doing. So be a part of it or not. Right. And so I and that part of it, I like what's going on there. And as John said, we just need to see a little bit more offensive cohesion and maybe some weapons up there. And because in the AFC, if they were in the NFC, they'd have Philadelphia to deal with, and that's about all.
Yeah,
but they're in the AFC, where now you've got the Jets, all this, and you've got Cincinnati and Kansas City, and it goes on and on. So they're just in that situation like my Utah Jazz was back in the day when they were at the top of their game, but unfortunately, so was Michael Jordan.
Yeah, the top of their game was about an eighth of the way from the top, unfortunately. They got right there to the cusp and then couldn't close.
That's right.
Close the deal.
They just couldn't. Their fingernails were on it, but that was all because Michael Jordan came up and said, "I don't think so." So
smacked it away. Yeah, smacked it away like Mutombo. No, it suggests an organizational plan, which is key. There are, like you said, you brought up the Cardinals. Talk about a franchise that looks like it's adrift in the ocean with no plan.
Right. It's adrift and submerged all at the same time.
Right. But then, you brought up the idea, John, about him being a defensive coach, about McDermott, a defensive coach. And that has apparently caused some ripples in the water there, as we know that Leslie Frazier, their defensive coordinator, had stepped away for the season. And there was a lot of speculation about why that was. And here it's kind of come out this week that Frazier stepped away he didn't like the idea that in their playoff game, the one that they lost, that it seemed like the play calling duties were yanked from him there in the last minute or so by Sean McDermott, and McDermott started calling plays himself. That is not the greatest. If that's the case, if that's what happened, that is not a great vote of confidence in your coordinator there. And it's not necessarily the best look to other people on the coaching staff, on the roster. Like, okay, if you're going when times get tough, if you don't trust the people that you've delegated to, do you trust me? How is this going to happen to me when it's crunch time? So yeah, do you find that that throws a little bit of a wrench in things here?
Yeah, totally.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
It's also like, I would be nervous if I was a defensive coordinator candidate looking for a job and like the Bills are interviewing me, and I'd be like, well, am I actually going to be able to call plays here, or is the head coach just going to take over? Because that was an issue for the offense in Philadelphia the year after they won the Super Bowl, where Doug Peterson was taking over calling plays, and it clearly did not work out.
Right. It's one thing. It's one thing if you're hired as the offensive coordinator in San Francisco and everybody goes in knowing that Kyle Shanahan is the dude.
Right.
Right. It's another thing if you're told you're the dude, and then when it comes down to it, literally the most important, moments of the season, you get the rug yanked out from under you, and you're put away. Kevin, what's your thoughts on that real quick here?
Well, on the other side of the ball, it's kind of like if you're trying to interview for the head offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, knowing full well that you're not calling the plays. So what exactly am I going to do?
What is my job?
Moral support. Yeah.
Moral support and stand and hug the players as they come off the field, or what?
Highly paid cheerleader in a polo.
Yep. Yeah. So if top quality guys are not going to take a situation like that, so maybe that is an issue up there. But if you're the head coach and you don't think that your coordinator, for whatever reason, is doing what he needs to do, then as the head coach, you need to step in.
And we've seen moments in the past where teams have gone into the season with this situation where, okay, the coach says, yeah, I'm calling plays, you're my coordinator, but you're really kind of just helping implement the plan. I'm the one who's going to call plays. We've seen coaches switch that in both directions. We've seen guys go into the season and say, I'm not calling plays, and then they yank it from their coordinator, but they generally do it between games. They generally do it in a, after a really poor game or whatever, or as to try and kind of light a fire under the asses of their other team. But we've also seen guys go the other way where they started calling the plays and they realized, I can't concentrate on the team enough if I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if the head coach is doing too much, that's bad.
It's definitely going to make people, I think, pause. Yeah, about applying for certain positions there. We're going to listen to our spot from Manscaped here, and we come back on the other side. Then we'll get into this best ball ADP that we've been looking more at here.
Let's do it.
We've touched on it a little bit here in our news headlines, but we'll really dive into that. But first, we're going to hear from the fine folks over at Manscaped.
Spring has sprung, and our friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped you tidy up all the nooks and crannies of your body's basement. But this year, Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using code BELLY20 to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. So tame your mane with the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. The sun is peeking back out, which means you'll have to show your face in the daylight again. So use the kit to make sure your scruff looks award-winning, whether you have glorious beard flow or some smooth, sleek cheeks. Save 20% off and free shipping with the code BELLY20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code BELLY20 at manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
Yeah, some smooth, sweet cheeks and other assorted, areas and paraphernalia. That is a new code, by the way, everybody pay attention. That is a new code, BELLY20 there for Manscaped. Get 20% off your order there. But yeah, definitely get over there and help those fine folks out, as they will help you out in all sorts of ways there, gentlemen. All right. So ADP, ADP and best ball. We talked, Kevin, you and I talked best ball a little bit a couple of weeks ago. We talked a little bit of strategies in that. One of the strategies we've talked about, and that's well known here in best ball, that's more prevalent in best ball and daily than it is necessarily in redraft, is stacking. And putting together a stack. I mean, you can pair players. We pair players a lot. A quarterback and his top receiver, or quarterback and his tight end, or whatever. But true stacking, where you're putting together 3 or more even from the same team, can be a really effective way to ensure yourself points. I mean, we know going into a season that injuries aside, certain offenses are going to be more prone to pass the ball. They're going to be more explosive. We know certain running backs are going to be, more pass catcher prone than other guys. You go into the season expecting Saquon Barkley to catch the ball more than you do Nick Chubb. We know that going in. So, if you can put together, 3 or more, off of an offense that we know is going to be a nice passing offense, you can start to rack up points quickly and kind of keep yourself. You kind of maintain a nice floor of production all through the season, so that when you hit those big Tyler Lockett weeks where he scores 36 points by himself, then it really helps you out there. We talk about best ball. You always want to talk about your format. You always want to understand the format you're drafting for. For instance, the underdog, the stock options there, your everyday main lineup on underdogs is going to be 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, which is different from how some people play, a tight end, a flex, no super flex, and 10 bench there. Obviously, super flex means that quarterbacks jump to the front of the line in terms of importance, but that's not the case in, like, say, underdog, which is one of the biggest and best, one of the most popular platforms to play best ball on. But the thing about stacking is you don't want to go for the stack at all costs. You don't want to just dive all in on the idea that, since this is my quarterback, I have to have his receiver, or, since I got this receiver, I have to get his quarterback. Your season's not over if you don't complete the perfect stack with your first round pick. It certainly does help, though. So some stacks, when you talk about ADP and best ball, stacks, in my opinion, in just my logic, stacks affect the ADP of best ball, because if you get Justin Jefferson in round 1, you are more likely to want Kirk Cousins later in the draft than somebody who doesn't have Justin Jefferson in a best ball format. So since you're more likely to want Kirk Cousins, you're more likely to draft Kirk Cousins before his possible ADP. So you're probably pulling his ADP down a little bit compared to, or higher, I should say, than it normally would be. With that in mind, let's look and talk about some ADP, here for some specific teams or players. And let's look at some stacks here that we think are not just doable, but are actually preferable in terms of their ADP, where you can get these 3 guys without having to reach terribly for them. But John, I know that you've been kind of chomping at the bit to get at this here. Let's start it off with you here. When you look at ADP from best ball here, what's the first thing you want to talk about here that jumps out at you here?
Well, I think the most important thing is you want to go after those guys that will have multiple, 30-point snap games where they just go off. So, that's like your Jamar Chases, your Justin Jeffersons, like you were saying, which brings me to my point. I think my favorite stack right now is Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, because those are guys that you can find 60 points in a week, 2 or 3 times a year. Is that realistic? I don't know. You probably would have to reach a little bit on Joe Burrow after you get Jamar Chase in the first round, but I think that's worth it.
No, I can back you up 100%, John, on this, because let's say you're in a 12-team league and you're at the turn. You're number 12.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I was looking at this. So if you're wanting to do this at number 12, you could take Lamar Jackson and then Joe Burrow back to back.
Wow.
And that locks in your quarterbacks like you couldn't believe. And then when your turn comes back around, guess who's sitting there? T. Higgins sitting right there. And then if you want to team him with Joe Mixon, he's sitting right there. So there's a stack right off the bat that you don't have to do any reaching for. You don't have to, if you're at, maybe if you're 12 or maybe you're the guy that's right behind 12, when it swings back your way, you might be able to get Joe Burrow and then the same stack if you're like, let's say you're 11. So, and I was looking through this and that stood out to me in a major way that you could get these players. You don't have to reach for them. You don't have to, sit and, pray while the draft's going on, any of that stuff. It falls right in your lap.
I think that's really funny. Like you brought up Bengals and right away, Kevin and I both lit up because they're on all three of our stacks. We talk about it's an offense that's going to be high pass volume, high scoring. It's been a great offense to have a piece of here the last couple of years. If you get Burrow as your quarterback in best ball, you're always getting that. You're always getting that pass game. If you get anybody in that pass game, great. You just got more shares of it. I'll tell you what, I did not intend for Mocha Frappe Milk Stout to go down as well as it's going down this morning. So I'm going to open a second.
You have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, well, we didn't talk about that. Now, Kevin, I know you're at work, but what do you got in a cup today, buddy? You got water in a cup here?
No, you know what? I'm going solo right here. This is just wrong. This is absolutely wrong. Man. And so next week, remind me, Chase, and I'll have to recover from this.
You got to stay hydrated. Stay hydrated, man.
That's right. Got to stay hydrated. It's only, let me see. It's already 90 degrees and it's not even, 11 o'clock in the morning.
Attaboy. Hey, John, what are you drinking this morning?
Liquid IV.
There. Attaboy. Excellent. Yeah, I have 2 designated drivers. That's nothing wrong with that. Ring the bell. Bing, ding.
That's right. You're all set.
No, a Bengal stack based on where they're going right now is completely doable. If you get Chase, Jamar Chase is caught up in this wave, this trend right now this year. The in vogue thing this year looks to be to take more wide receivers in the first round. I think we're all
totally
kind of, scared away by the fact that every time we take a running back high, the guy ends up like missing 3/4 of the season. Thank you, Saquon. Thank you, CMC. But, Jamar Chase right now, his current ADP he's going around pick number 3 overall. But if you've got pick 3 overall and you pick up Jamar Chase, look at the ADPs then for, like you brought up, Kevin, T. Higgins, and look at the
if you're in a 1 quarterback league, that works out. But if you're in a 2 quarterback, that ain't happening.
If you're in a super flex league, you're a little bit hung up on that, and you may have to change some things that your tack here. But if you're in a single quarterback league and you're at the number 3 pick, Chase is going number 3.
That's correct.
No relation. Higgins is going at number 26. That's perfect. That's right in the wheelhouse of where you're going to be picking here when it comes back around to you. And then you've also got Burrow going at 33, which again is right there in the wheelhouse at the turn where you're going to be. So it's perfectly conceivable to put together at the very least a Chase Burrow Higgins stack without reaching for anybody. And that's key.
That's right. And even if you're the number 2 pick, you could do that exact same thing. Just move them up a pick, and you're still right there.
You're not reaching. That's the key.
2 and 3 picks, no, you're not reaching at all. Not at all.
If you take Chase 1, 2, or 3, you have not reached.
Yeah, there's lots of arguments for Chase number 1. I'm not sure I'm getting into all that, but
Yeah, I'm not. The idea grows on me, but the point there is that those 3 guys, their ADPs right now are perfect where you are not reaching to get that stack like we talked about. It's not get the stack at any cost. It's get the stack at proper value. Proper value for your top. I mean, if you have to spend your first 3 of your first 4 picks on this stack, you still come away happy with that in best ball.
That's right.
So that's a very doable stack for me. What's another position, or did you have anything else you wanted to add to that one, John, or you want to?
No, I agree with you guys.
Yeah.
We summed that up pretty well, I thought.
It's just, the idea of the value for that stack in particular. There are other stacks that are just as high profile that might be a little more pie in the sky based on their ADPs. But based on where those three guys are going, I love it. I
will say that like another stack that you will probably not be reaching on would be like a Jalen Waddle and Tua stack. Because you can get Waddle in the late second, and then you can get Tua. What's he going in best ball right now? He's got to be a little bit later. Like, is he like a 6th-round quarterback?
Where's Tua right?
Seventh or 8th?
He's going 82 overall. He's going as the QB 11, so you can get him late. Yeah, you can get him 9th round,
QB 10 or 11.
I mean, like that's great because Tua showed. I mean, he's got an arm. The concern is, can he stay healthy? But that's a high passing offense too. And Jalen Waddle can have spike weeks just like Tyreek Hill can, not as often, but you're not reaching.
No, you're not reaching at all. And one of the things that you have to think about in best ball is that the computer's going to take your best guy. You are not just picking one quarterback, and then when the bye week comes, I'll stream a guy. No, you're picking at least 2. You're picking at least one more than the number that you need to start, and you're hopefully matching up their bye weeks so that for sure you're going to have a quarterback every single week. You cannot punt on a week by week in best ball. That's not going to work. So you have to make sure that your at least bye weeks are covered. And with Tua being injury prone, that's going to happen. So it means that to protect yourself, you're probably going to reach for another quarterback. You might have to reach for a quarterback to make sure that you are insured against the idea of losing Tua for 5 games.
Oh, definitely. Don't take Tua without some kind of backup plan.
Yeah, Tua shouldn't be the first quarterback you draft in best ball.
No, definitely not.
Your second, though.
But you bring up a nice point that's a stack. I mean, if you're not worried about having Hill as part of that stack, that's a stack you could do, say, Tua and Waddle, and then say like their running back, Ache, or any of whoever ends up being the dang running back. Take your pick. They've got 23 of them. They probably signed 5 more since we started this show. But that's a stack that you don't have to spend, and you don't have to lock to your first round pick. You can go in a different direction in the first round and still get a nice stack of Tua, Waddle, and then Berrios, Achane, Cook if it happens, Mostert, whoever. And you don't have to spend quite the capital that you will to try and get a Bills stack or a Bengals stack. So that's a good point there. Who else here, John, do you like here or not like at ADP here, as whether as part of a stack or not?
I'm not a big fan of Jonathan Taylor as the running back 4. Like, I understand the upside. He doesn't have much competition in Indianapolis, but I just am a little bit weary. Like, if I were to draft him, say, in the 2nd round somewhere, I think I'm better off drafting a wide receiver, like Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, something like that. So that caught my eye first, seeing Jonathan Taylor as the RB4. I was like,
right now, Jonathan Taylor's going to cost you a mid to late round first, probably, to get him.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And to do that, seeing what we saw out of him last year. Now, there's been a lot of talk about a bounce back year, John, but I want to throw it back to you real quick here. Yeah, are you worried about the idea of Anthony Richardson being their quarterback, taking away some of those any rushing, red zone work they get, and B, are you worried that offense isn't going to function year 1 enough that you want any part of Jonathan Taylor this year?
Yeah, certainly. I can totally see Anthony Richardson vulturing some touchdowns. I also think that because of his lack of throwing ability currently that everyone's talking about, I think they're going to draw up a lot of plays specifically, designed run plays for Anthony Richardson. That's just going to screw Jonathan Taylor over. So, I mean, I'd much rather take someone like Josh Jacobs before Jonathan Taylor.
All right. Kevin looks like he's on the phone. He's
on call
business.
here.
He's got business deals going down or something. Top secret. We'll mute him for a second. But no, that's one of the things that people have said often about the Ravens offense is we know they're going to be a great rushing offense. We know they're going to be a great rushing offense, but the rushing comes from the quarterback position to a large part as well. Whereas, other teams that get inside the red zone that don't have necessarily that rushing threat for quarterback, the running back has a better chance of getting more. You're going to get more rushing touchdowns if Jared Goff is your quarterback. Your running back's going to get more rushing touchdowns. If you've got Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, you may get vultured 2 or 3 during the course of the season.
Yeah,
Anthony Richardson certainly looks like he has that potential.
Yes.
But then the other part of it is, yes, his throwing options or his throwing difficulties, he's still growing as a passer.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll hope that Shane Steichen can get the most out of him, possible. But he's still growing as a passer. And if he can't end up being, a viable passer, is that offense scary enough that teams can't key on Jonathan Taylor? I agree with you. I think that taking Jonathan Taylor as the running back 3 or 4 right now in the first round, it's a risk. If he's one of those players that if he's there when you pick in round 2, no matter where you pick in round 2, you almost have to jump on it because then you've got value from him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a scary guy to have as your top overall pick. You can't win the draft in your first round, but you can lose it in the first round.
Yeah. And we have with Jonathan Taylor.
And we have already had that. Unfortunately, John, you've already cost us that. Kevin, you're back. You look like
all right.
Back.
I am back. And
what's your take on the Colts here? What's your take on the Colts first, and then?
Well, we've talked to you and I about that and how less excited I was about Anthony Richardson winding up there, and he's going to have to be an effective quarterback just to throw the football, to be able to, so that if there's any kind of running game whatsoever. And so I'm a little leery about that. I'm not so leery as much about him being hurt. I think he's going to be okay with that. But at number 6 overall, I'm not sure I'm buying that. And another person I'm not buying too much. Number 4 overall is Bijan Robinson. I like the talent. No, because everybody keeps forgetting there's a 1,000-yard rusher behind him.
I know.
He doesn't step off into space and disappear completely.
I'm definitely the one forgetting that.
Okay.
Or more so ignoring. I'm not
ignoring. Okay.
I'm ignoring it.
I like him as far as a talent. But Atlanta is not the best scene for him. So
okay.
But I want to come back to getting to a stack here that I was able to pull off pretty easily, and that is NTN from Jacksonville. Okay, and then you get the quarterback, of course, and then you get the tight end Evan Ingram. And that was a stack I was able to pull off in a 1 quarterback league. Yeah. I'm talking about in a 2 quarterback league that ain't working out.
No, but that's a stack too that doesn't. You're not even worrying about including their wide receivers that we know are going to be
right. And there could be some of those guys that are involved in that as well.
Right.
And so, but like I said, Travis Etienne, and then Ingram. And then
Lawrence there with them. Yeah,
Trevor Lawrence. That was a stack that I was able to pull off pretty easily. And that, you could maybe build a stack aside from that because you're not really, there's not a lot of heavy lifting involved with that. So that is something that I was able to pull out pretty easily in a 1 quarterback league, as I mentioned. And so another player that Justin Fields. Okay. Yeah. They've got him at number 6 quarterback overall. I certainly expected him to jump up from what he was, but to all the way to number 6, I am not ready to buy that just yet.
All right. Well, John, I want to hear your take here because you said you're ignoring Tyler Algier here for your purposes. You sound like you're all in on Bijan. Let's hear a rebuttal here before we talk about the rest of that.
I just think that the draft capital that they spent on Bijan shows that they're ready to put him in as the bell cow on the Falcons offense. Now, they run the ball a lot, so I wouldn't be surprised if Algier still got a fair amount of touches. I can see Algier being an amazing like bench stash. In fact, if I was drafting best ball, getting Bijan and Tyler Algier is not the worst draft picks there, because you're probably not going to reach on Tyler Algier.
And Algier may have standalone value.
Yeah.
But he's also definitely, coming into it right away that he is a super handcuff.
Yeah. And I mean, we saw it, all the hype that was built up with Breece Hall last year. I mean, injuries happen, no matter how good you are. So if Bijan goes down, I'm very confident that Algier can fill that role as the running back one, and I'd be okay.
It's almost the opposite of what happened last year in Seattle with Rashard Penny coming into the season as the veteran who was the starter, and you knew that you had the rookie behind him, Kenneth Walker, who could jump right in there, and ended up having to jump right in there and then took it over. It's almost the opposite of that, where we've got the rookie here as the starter, but we know that there is a guy behind him that if Bijan had to miss any considerable time, Algier can step in there and, like I said, be a super handcuff, as opposed to just, a guy or the guy who's second on the depth chart there. So I tend to probably lean a little more towards your position there, John. I like Bijan's fit in Atlanta. It was kind of a kick in the pants there for anybody who had Algier, or for those.
Yeah, you needed to get some CPR if you had on draft day.
Running back draft was like that, though. Yeah. Every single top running back went somewhere where there was already a viable fantasy producer.
Yeah, that's right. Charbonneau and Gibbs.
Two guys, right? Gibbs, all of them went somewhere where there was already a viable fantasy producer. It was like, you gotta be kidding me, because I like to see the wealth spread. It makes things easier from our standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Kevin, you brought up your Jaguar stack there without even using the wide receivers there, and that brings up a nice point about, we don't always think about necessarily running backs being part of it, but if you've got a running back that is going to be part of the pass game, he can be a real valuable part of this whole equation here, especially if if you don't necessarily know who the wide receiver 2 is, or if a team doesn't have a great tight end, and they're going to throw more of their hot reads, more of their short game is going to go to their running back there. But yeah, that's a situation where you can put together a stack there without even having to worry about their wide receivers and still get some of the volume of that pass game that we expect to see, I guess, down in Jacksonville. John Kirkner, who else have you been looking at here, or who else do you find egregious one way or another?
Egregious. Let's talk egregious here.
Egregious. What a word that is.
That's that English degree working for me.
Okay.
First time all week.
I'll try and not bring my my bias into play here, but I am very high on Devontae Smith, just because he is perfect for best ball, because there are games in Philadelphia where it's a Devontae Smith game, and there's games in Philadelphia where it's an A.J. Brown game. So either of those receivers I'm certainly liking on, and you can get Devontae Smith later than A.J. Brown, of course. Obviously, he's the more hot commodity, rightfully so, because you will have more spike games out of A.J. Brown than Devontae. But, I mean, another guy that could step in as the wide receiver 1 if A.J. Brown were to go down.
Big time. That's a stack where if you're going to be spending a late first, early second on A.J. Brown, and you are probably going to have to spend your very next pick, if you're lucky enough to get it, on Hurts. And then you're going to probably have to spend your very next pick, if you're lucky enough, on Smith. You're probably going to have to spend your first 3 picks, or 3 out of your first 4, to put that. This is a rough stack to put together if you want the big 3 names. If you're only looking at doing Hurts and pairing up with 2 of them, you might have a little more realistic shot at going, say, Brown, Hurts, and then adding in Goddard, their tight end, or adding in Rashad Penny. But adding in somebody else the running back, say, or like I said, Goddard there as your third leg of that stack. But I'm with you that Devontae Smith is a perfect best ball type player. He's like a Tyler Lockett for me. I always used to say Tyler Lockett was great for best ball, but I hated having him in a redraft because he's going to have like 3 36-point games all season. But then he always seemed like he was going to have, fill that in with a lot of 3-point games and 8-point games.
Yep.
And you never knew. The minute you started him was the minute he didn't play a great game. And the minute you took him off your starting lineup was the day he went off for 3 touchdowns and 180 yards on 17 catches. And Smith is a little bit in those same lines. He's a little more consistent, I think, than Lockett was early in his career. But I love Smith as a best ball player in and of himself, separate from the idea of stacking. If you can pair him with Hurts and either Goddard or Brown, that's going to be one of the top offenses in the league there. Kevin, what's your thoughts on that there?
Well, I'm going to give you as you mentioned him, Tyler Lockett. That's my Seahawks. And
speaking of bringing your biases into it, here we go.
Yeah, I try and leave that at the door, but
we all do. But none of us can.
Since I've talked to the guy who put Geno Smith in the same tier as Anthony Richardson,
Wow, there he is, keeping it topical.
I don't know what's going on right there, but when it comes to stacks. If I talked about a couple weeks ago, Chase, remember that you could possibly get both wide receivers and Smith on your team.
Yes.
Because they've got Geno Smith at number 14, quarterback overall. And then when you switch over to the wide receivers, there you've got where do you go? I just lost him.
Metcalf's going in the 3rd round right now. Metcalf's going in the mid-3rd round at number 32.
There's Metcalf at number 16. And then Tyler Lockett is at number 26. So depending on where you are, where you're drafting, that is a stack that you could possibly work together. And so I like that. And one last thing I'll say, because I got to get off, but the Lions is another stack that you could possibly work together. Because, when you look at their quarterback, and I like him a lot, Jared Goff is at number 16. And so if you pair him as your number 2 quarterback, and you can get some, and he doesn't really matter. Detroit Lions, any of them, are all set to deliver fantasy.
Another offense that I think we're all excited to see. Before you got to run off here, Kevin, real quick, where can we find you? What you got going on here?
Well, you always can find me at Twitter at Kevin62, WILSEA, and you can see me tonight. I will join that show in progress on the Fantasy Baseball show tonight at 7, probably 20 or so, 7:30, something like that. And I'll be with Vince on the Fantasy Baseball show, and you can always go to the Belly Up Fantasy website. I've got unbelievably enough, I wrote an article about Cincinnati Reds, which you could have brained me completely before I thought I'd be writing anything about Cincinnati Red players.
And
but
it's not just Ellie De La Cruz. That is a team on fire right now.
Yep. So they just had their 12-game win streak stamp yesterday. So there are a lot of players to be excited about, and our show is unbelievably enough is going to revolve around Cincinnati. So you'll definitely want to check that out.
All right. Yeah. Everybody get over there, bellyupfantasysports.com. Check out Kevin's articles there, his waiver wire pickups each week and all that kind of thing. Kevin, thanks for joining us from what looks to be the Springfield nuclear power plant there.
Yeah, we'll try and keep the juices flowing around here. So
just keep pushing the button. Just keep pushing the button, friend. Thanks for coming in, Kevin. We'll let you get back to work there, friend.
All right. See you guys later.
See you, Kevin. And by the way, I had Geno Smith in my C tier and Anthony Richardson in the D tier, so I gave a little more love to Geno Smith there.
They were close, but we
were.
We had
they
them
were
separated. Yeah. I don't know about Justin Fields. Hey, Justin Fields, first off, to touch on Justin Fields, he was quarterback 6 last season in points per game and in points overall. I don't think he's going wildly out of place here, but I am not as I don't know. I'm probably not as optimistic on him as maybe the Bears brain trust is, but of course I'm a Packer fan, so I'm probably there's my bias creeping in there.
Right.
Plus the entire, the whole idea of the bias of history, where the Bears have literally never had a quarterback that was any good. Sorry, said Luckman. They just haven't. I mean, I'm coming from Green Bay, where we seem to have grown them on trees. When we're praying against all hope that continues with Jordan Love, but yeah, I don't think Justin Fields is going wildly out of place here. But I probably won't have a ton of Justin Fields on my teams just because I'm not as convinced about the passing side of things for him there.
Yeah, that's a big concern. I do love the upside that Justin Fields brings, but he would have to be the first quarterback that you draft.
He's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the game. We know that rushing quarterbacks are going to leave you a solid floor to work with and are going to give you that blow up capability in terms of best ball, because in the event that Fields does throw 2 touchdowns, that he's already got his rushing floor on top of that. So yeah, he offers great potential. I just don't know that I'm willing to pay the price for that potential.
I agree with that, especially for best ball. He's someone that you can get later on in like redraft leagues or something like that, and you're relying on his rushing upside to at least get you like 15-point floor. Right. But you're going to have those games with Justin Fields where it's the Bears. I mean, they're going to have games where they get absolutely smacked and they don't have any offensive production. That's really going to hurt you, especially if you're, very drafting Justin Fields high in the draft.
And like you brought up, if you're taking Justin Fields, you are either taking him, yes, like you said, as your top quarterback, because he's going quarterback 5. He's a starting quarterback in terms of ADP right now. You're either drafting him as your top quarterback, or if you're not, you've already drafted. I mean, I'm hoping if you're drafting him as your second quarterback for whatever reason, it means you've already drafted a quarterback who should be, in theory, a safe bet. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, the guys who realistically could and should go in front of him, are relatively safe bets all across the board there. You don't need to spend that pick then on Justin Fields. You can afford to wait a while and grab my guy Daniel Jones later, get the exact same or close to the same upside as Justin Fields is going to give you at much better value, where you can spend that pick somewhere else and set yourself up better at one of the other 3 premier positions in best ball.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to Justin Fields in best ball this year.
Yeah, for best ball, I agree. And let's not forget, teams have a whole year of watching Justin Fields tape. So, maybe we're not going to see those back-to-back.
He's not catching anybody
games
by
or whatever.
surprises.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happened with Lamar Jackson, He's slowed down too.
Just hoping that, even as a Packer fan, hoping that Justin Fields can avoid, say that, like the Robert Griffith type injuries that we saw derail his career.
Yep.
And hopefully he can be a little bit more. I would rather see Justin Fields, even as a Packer fan, I would rather see Justin Fields trend much more towards Jalen Hurts and his career arc and his the health that he's been able to show than the Robert Griffith, the third type stuff. Anybody else that you want to talk about that jumps out at you here, either as a stack or as part of or as just for their ADP being way out of whack or dead on?
Well, I think that someone that I'm pretty high on this year, of course, health is always an issue, but for best ball, I mean, it's perfect to draft this guy, Keenan Allen, just an absolute PPR machine, going as the wide receiver, like 19, somewhere in the 4th round, beginning of the 4th round. I mean, like, come on. I'll take that any day. I mean, it's such a high-powered offense. Lots of ball spreading to go around on that team with Eckler, Mike Williams, and now you got Quentin Johnson in the mix. But Keenan Allen, if he's healthy, he's going to be the guy that they're throwing the ball to, and he just eats up, 10 balls a game. So I'll take that until he gets injured.
I was going to bring up, we think it was a down year for Justin Herbert. Nobody can really debate that from last season. We were expecting more than we got out of Herbert last season. But a Chargers stack where you put together Eckler, Herbert, and then whomever else you can get is a completely gettable stack. I mean, Eckler's worth a mid to late first round pick. He's going to go somewhere in that range. You can get Herbert then down in the fourth round or so, or down around the, in the 40s there. So you can set yourself up to have Eckler, who is going to catch passes from Herbert and is a viable part of a pass stack. Eckler and Herbert. But then whether you can pair him with Allen, and right now Allen and Herbert's ADPs are real close. They're right next door to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be hard to get unless you're on a turn. But pairing Eckler and Herbert with any of the receivers on that team, whether you want to talk about Keenan Allen, whether you want to talk about Mike Williams, who again, can have monster games, but health-wise, is he going to play every week? Is he not? Is this going to be a Keenan Allen week? Is it going to be a Mike Williams week if they're both healthy? We don't know how Quentin Johnston is yet going to fit into this offense, but he's a guy that's going way down around pick 100, 102, somewhere around there, far enough down where, again, you could throw him in that mix as one of your, and not relying on him as one of your top receivers.
Yeah, late round flyer.
Right?
Why not?
And Gerald Everett is going even way later.
Wow.
171st or so.
I haven't heard that name in a while.
And it's not a name I really care to hear.
Yeah.
But we talked about before. You want to be sure that you're backing up. You're not just taking a starting lineup and hoping for the best, because those starting lineups are all going to have a bye week at some point, and there are going to be weeks they don't produce. So you are not just taking one tight end. Gerald Everett as your tight end 2 or 3 is a real nice pick. I mean, right now, I believe he's going to tight end 11 or so right now anyway. So he's borderline a starter on his own recognizance. Well, it depends. He's a little lower than that, I guess. But he's a borderline starter. He's a streamable starter in like redraft and in daily.
Certainly.
But I don't like relying on him for my top guy. But as a second guy in a high volume passing offense, that I don't have to worry about finding his go off games. The computer will find them for me. And chances are, like if I've got a Travis Kelce type, if I've got a George Kittle type, if I've got a Kyle Pitts type, if Gerald Everett registers for me, if he makes my starting lineup as my flex or as my tight end in a given week, that's probably a good sign for how it's either a good sign for how my other tight end did, or it's a good thing because it means that it's the 1 week that Travis Kelce or George Kittle didn't go off.
Yeah,
I like Gerald Everett as a number 2. I don't like him as a number 1.
Yeah, I think with best ball, when you're getting into the later rounds, you're really just thinking like, all right, is this offense going to score a lot of points? And the Chargers are one of those teams that can put up points, and they'll give up a lot too.
Right. I brought up the idea earlier of a stack that you don't have to necessarily link to your first round pick. Couple of stacks I like that aren't going to necessarily cost you first round value would be, okay. Now I'm going to try and leave my bias out of this, but at the same time, I'm also going to preface this by saying I'm not taking these guys, most of these guys, in the hopes that they're my number 1. I'm taking all of these guys hoping that they are 2s and 3s, but having this sneaky stack where if this offense ends up really good, I've got something here. I didn't have to spend a ton on it. And I'm talking about my Packers. I'm talking about Christian Watson, Jordan Love, then pairing them with either Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, or whoever wins the tight end battle between Josiah DeGuara, Joe Musgrove, Tucker Kraft. But this is an offense we don't know a lot about. But if you're not counting on them to be your ones, you could be pleasantly surprised. You could get a lot of points out of this offense, potentially. We know Watson and Dobbs both did it last year. It's just, can they do it with Love? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would also be inclined to throw Aaron Jones into that mix too. I mean, he's a receiving running back.
He's catching passes. Yes.
Yep. And now, he's a receiving running back with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. So can Jordan Love do that? You probably know more than me. I guess, we're all kind of waiting to find out.
Listen, if you're Jordan Love and you're learning on the go, which he will be, I know he's been in the league 3 years, but he's learning on the go. There's going to be times when the game looks really quick and you're looking for your hot read, who are generally your hot reads? Your tight ends and your running backs.
Yep.
And we know that Aaron Jones is a pass catching running back, whether he's the hot read or not. And this is a team that will throw the screen pass and will throw the bubble screen and that kind of thing. So yes, exactly. If you can get Watson, Love, and Jones together, or Jones, Love, and whomever together,
Yeah.
that could be, especially if you're not counting on it, like I said, as your top tier stack, you could get a lot of points out of that throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, I think that's big for like the rookie quarterbacks. Their best friend's going to be the tight end and the running back.
Right.
You know, I'm really liking the CJ Stroud to Dalton Schultz stack right now.
Yeah.
I mean, Dalton Schultz is so late. He's like the tight end 11, it looks like.
Right.
And we saw him produce in Dallas 2 years ago, I guess.
He's a solid player. You know he's going to
is.
be where he should be.
Yep.
And
I
that's
agree.
key for a rookie quarterback. I've said the same thing about what they did in Carolina. I love the fact that Carolina has all these Adam Thielen and Hayden Hurst and DJ Shark, guys who have been in the league that Bryce Young can trust to be where they're supposed to be. And then on top of that, he can now grow, and Miles Sanders too, for that matter, out of the backfield, and Chuba Hubbard. But he can now grow with Jonathan Mingo as he has that safety blanket of all these good, solid veterans around him. I really like how they set that up to, even though we don't expect Adam Thielen to be in their long-term plans, we don't necessarily expect Hayden Hurst to be in their long-term plans. Those two guys are part of the long-term plan because they're going to allow Bryce Young to develop this season and have a solid foundation during his rookie season, as opposed to Deshaun Kaisering his way out of the league.
Yeah. Let's not forget Adam Thielen is like a perfect win now wide receiver, that you don't have to spend a lot of, draft capital on,
right?
Because he stays relatively healthy his whole career. And he's a absolute red zone target, which Bryce Young is going to need if they can find their way into the red zone. That is,
he's intelligent. He's in a good situation. There is a realistic path to him being. Laugh if you want. I know what Adam Thielen has been, and I'm not talking necessarily to you there, but I know what Adam Thielen has been the last couple of years. I know the trajectory that we've seen his career taking. Yeah. We know it's late in his football life. But there is a realistic path for him to be the number one receiver on a team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Number one receivers on teams are nice shots in best ball, especially late. You're not going to have to spend a lot to get Adam Thielen on your roster, but there's a guy with upside because he has a realistic shot to be the number one on his team, such as it is. Do I expect the Panthers to be, a top 10 passing offense in this league? Not by any stretch. But the man's he's got a viable path to being a number one, which means he's got a viable path to being a very usable option in a best ball format.
Yeah.
All right. One other stack I wanted to bring up real quick, an offense that I'm higher on than probably some other people. And again, I'll take it back around to my guy. I'm a Daniel Jones truther. Darren Waller, Daniel Jones, and then take your pick of one of the 1,700 slot receivers that they employ in New York. If you compare the two of them with Barkley is another running back we know will catch passes, but I like Waller. I like Jones, especially if your Jones is not your number one option. If he's your second quarterback, even in a one quarterback league, if Jones is your second quarterback, you're going to have solid production out of your quarterback room every single week.
Totally. Yeah.
Waller can be your starting tight end. He can go off. Waller's also the kind of tight end that can go off enough that when your second tight end has a nice 18-point game, you can count both of them towards that. Waller there's every chance that Waller slides into your slot position, your flex position.
Yeah.
There's every chance that happens in any given week. He's one of the handful, 5 or 6 tight ends that have that go off ability like that. But then whoever you pair them with, or whoever you triple them with, I should say, whether it's Barkley, whether it's whoever emerges from their wide receiver room, Jalen Hyatt or, Wan'Dale Robinson, if and when he's healthy, Sterling Shepard, because he's supposedly going to be healthy this year again for 12 minutes. But yeah, the Giants are another stack I really like. Is there anybody else that you like that's kind of an under the radar pick there for a stack, or
Well,
are
I
you
think
in on the Giants?
I'm actually surprised I didn't bring this up earlier when we were talking about egregious rankings, but I'm just so high up on Garrett Wilson this year, and you don't have to spend a lot on Aaron Rodgers either. So, like, let's have a bounce back year for Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, Garrett Wilson, although there are a ton of now Packers wide receivers, they're the New York Packers at this point. But Garrett Wilson's still the guy. He is, and that's going to be high upside with Garrett Wilson. Aaron Rodgers, are we going to see, his 30-point weeks? I'm not sure, but a much higher chance of those happening on the Jets now than if he were to stay on the Packers.
And you're taking Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback too. You're taking Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback too.
Who would have ever thought that we'd be saying that?
But if Rodgers with Garrett Wilson to throw to, Breece Hall and Michael Carter and Ibanaconda in the backfield, and with not just Wilson, but I mean,
Lazard.
Never used Denzel Mims, but his buddy Lazard. Corey Davis is still there, at least till this afternoon. And I'm not predicting anything there, but they've got a ton. Cobb is there. They've got a ton of receivers, a ton of help there. You may not necessarily, other than Wilson, you may not be able to pick a reliable receiver off of this team.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they have so many guys that can catch the football speaks well for Aaron Rodgers, because he's throwing to all of them. Anytime any of them catches a pass, it's good for Rodgers. So we don't have to decipher that if Rodgers is the part of that equation that you have. I agree with you, though. I'm a big Garrett Wilson fan this year. And what a draft that team had last year.
Oh, yeah.
And what a foundation they have set themselves up to have. I mean, had Breece Hall not been hurt, he was likely the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
He gets hurt, they still had the offensive rookie of the year in Garrett Wilson. Oh, yeah. And then they had a guy named Sauce that won the defensive rookie of the year.
Exactly.
Like, are you kidding me? What an absolute haul in the draft. And I think we all saw it the day it happened, the weekend it happened, but it played out about as perfectly as you could have hoped for. That's one of the best drafts. Right now, it looks like it may have been one of the best drafts in history. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I don't think that's recency bias. They just nailed it with all three of those picks.
Yeah, they did. Certainly.
I agree with you. That's a good team that we expect to have a good offense, but you don't have to spend a ton of capital on outside of possibly Wilson. But even that, I mean, Garrett Wilson isn't getting he's not getting top like 7-8 talk right now where you're going to have to spend your first round pick on him. He's a second round. He's solidly in the second round, but that's a stack that you don't have to spend a ton of capital on and still could reap a ton of benefits from. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, we've gone long enough here, I think, John. We're gonna let our fine folks get back to their Sunday, get back to their families. I'll get back upstairs and relieve my wife from the duties of taking care of our 4- and 5-year-old. But before we get out of there, we mentioned your articles that you've got up live right now at bellyupfantasysports.com on your quarterback tiers, part 1 and part 2. It's a 2-parter, folks, so don't miss out on that. But what else have we got coming up here, or what are we seeing going forward for the eye test podcast there?
Yeah, recently we just did a dynasty startup mock draft. We're still we're pretty much settled with our dynasty leagues. I mean, I've done all my drafts for dynasty. I've done my rookie drafts.
You're lucky because I haven't even had one yet.
Yeah, you haven't had one yet?
We're waiting. I'm waiting. I've got 7 different dynasty teams right now, but I'm waiting on at least 1 or 2 guys to, piss or get off the pot here, I guess, and waiting for a couple of orphans. It looks like it's going to be potential orphans. So I have not had an opportunity yet to do a dynasty draft, and I haven't done any new startups yet. So you're lucky. I envy you, friend.
Yep. So we're pretty much good there. But I am starting to get into redraft mode. I mean, it is about that time where I'm just itching to start talking redraft. And I'm excited for the Belly Up redraft league that we started. Yes. So I'm excited for that one too. 14 man league. I don't think I've ever done one. So I'm interested to do that.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to the Belly Up, quote unquote war room league, I guess, as well. So we'll be facing off in that one together. Kevin kind of mentioned earlier, we are big proponents of drafting as late as you can. on this show. I hate
yeah.
the idea of doing a redraft this early in the season. And then, all it takes is for your wide receiver 1 to step off the curb wrong, and now he's out for the season.
Mm-hmm.
And you're behind the 8 ball 3 months before the season even gets started. But yeah, I am. Yeah, it's getting to that point where like you want to start talking about, you want to start getting at it, but yeah, we're not even in mini camps yet. We got to calm down. Yeah, what's your philosophy, real quick, then too? I mean, I know I'm bringing up another point here, but what's your philosophy here on? Yeah,
same page. It's like a Labor Day weekend, type of deal. That last week of August. I mean, I probably will have 4 redraft drafts in a week span. My girlfriend will be very upset with that.
Right. I will have several drafts. Yes. Between the Sunday of Labor Day weekend and the Thursday night opening game.
Yeah.
I will have several drafts for my redraft leagues, including my top home league will be that Monday on Labor Day.
Mm-hmm.
But my auction league that I'm in with a bunch of other friends we'll probably do that the next night even. I'll have several. I want to get as much information and know as much about injuries and about situations and depth charts as possible. I don't understand the impulse to redraft right now.
Agreed.
Best ball, hey, it's kind of consequence free, so jump in and do it, and it's great practice for later on in the season. But yeah, redraft, let's let her ride. Well, thanks. I appreciate you being in here, John. You can find my rankings over at bellyupfantasysports.com, my rookie rankings here, because it is dynasty draft season. I mean, like you said, some of yours are done, but I've got all mine still coming. So I know that, there's other people out there in the same boat. So my rookie draft rankings are up there over at bellyupfantasysports.com. I will be releasing some articles here on my top 10 fantasy rookie draft picks. So keep an eye on that over there. You can get over there and check out all the other great stuff on the Belly Up Fantasy Sports and Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. You can find John here on the Eye Test Pod by going over there to bellyupsports.com. And hey, until then, thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure having you back again. Hope to see you back on our show real soon. And we will say Slanjava to everybody. We will see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.
Cheers.